Good morning, everybody. I, as the chair, will now call the virtual Building Code Structures Board meeting of January 26, 22 to order, and the time now is 9:31 a.m. In terms of first order of business is roll call. Melissa, could I ask you please to go ahead and call roll?
Eric Schmidt, Chair.
Here.
Andy Dykman, Vice Chair.
Here.
Stephen Forster.
Here.
Brenda Hartzog.
Here.
Gary Hakenen.
Here.
Marshall McGrady.
Here.
Randy Samuelson.
Here.
Eric Sandoval is having a technical issue and will join us later. We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And again, good morning, everybody. Want to just ask if you've had a chance to review the agenda and to see if you have any changes to the agenda. Okay, seeing none, last call. Okay, seeing none, I guess I have to read it this way. I, Chair Schmidt, rule the agenda and the order of business approved. All right. Next order of business is the approval of board draft meeting minutes of November 3rd, 2021. Go ahead and ask members if they have any changes to the minutes. Okay, seeing head, all right. Hearing none, last call. Okay, seeing nothing on the screen. I, again, as chair, rule final, the draft minutes of November 3rd, 2021. All right, we're flying through the agenda. Here we go. Okay, next order of business is the date for the next meeting. I want to make sure that everybody knows that we have a meeting on February 2nd. And also just want to get kind of a rough poll right here from the members to maybe give a thumbs up or just an affirmative that you have that on and you're able to attend that meeting. Oh, welcome, Eric. That we're good to go. So I'll be there, and okay, I think we'll have a quorum. Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you very much. That meeting we've got, it could be a long one, so just be prepared for that. It's really primarily around the code review changes, so that it could take a little while to get through those. I think, Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we also as a backup have February 9th if we need some additional time on the calendars.
Correct.
Okay, so hopefully I think you've seen a communication from staff on that. So if you could reserve February 9th as well. Does that sound okay for the board? Give a thumbs up on that one too. Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate that. And we'll get through those code changes as efficiently as we can. All right, next order of business is a welcome, as well as also a farewell and a thank you. Wanted to, let's see, Kail, where are you at, sir? There you are. Hi there. Hi, Kail. Wanted to take a moment and the board officially thanks Kail Zuschlag, the IBEW Oregon State Organizing Coordinator, for his service on the board from November 2017 through June of 2021. We appreciate Kail's service to all Oregonians, and on behalf of the board, wanted to again express our thanks and gratitude for your contributions to the Building Code Structures Board, Kail.
Thank you. It's been an honor to serve with all of you guys. It's super appreciated the experience, and thank you guys for all that you guys are doing and putting forth for our state.
Thank you, Kail. Appreciate that very much.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, may I show you Kail's certificate?
Oh, cool. Awesome. Oh, nice.
Okay.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right. It'll be either mailed or he can pick it up, or however you want to get that to him.
Yes. Well, I'll be in touch with you about that, Kail.
Okay. That sounds great. Kail, again, thank you very much. Also, the Building Codes Structures Board wants to welcome Marshall McGrady. Marshall, welcome. And are you on the screen where I'm? Oh, there you are. Hi there. So want to welcome you as well. Marshall is a political director and PAC chairman for IBEW Local 48. The Oregon Senate confirmed Marshall's appointment for the term running from November of 2021 through June 2025. He represents the building trades on the board. Marshall has been an electrician and a local 48 member for 21 years. He was an apprentice at the NECA IBEW Electrical Training Center in Portland. He holds a general supervisor's electrical license in Oregon and a general journeyman license in Washington. He was a general foreman and superintendent primarily on large-scale new construction design builds. He also was an apprenticeship teacher for 16 years. He wants to serve on the board because he has learned how much behind-the-scenes policy making impacts on his industry and the public at large. Marshall said, and I'm quoting him, "I want to be sure to look after the best interest of the industry as well as all Oregonians. In his private time, he enjoys camping, gardening, woodworking, hiking, and keeping his 3 dogs happy, a Corgi, a Shepherd Retriever mix, and a St. Bernard." That's a combination. So Marshall, I want to welcome you to the board. Any opening? Yeah, please. Anything you'd like to kind of add to that?
No, I think you covered most of that. Thank you, Chair Schmidt, for that. I very much appreciate it. I'm very much looking forward to doing my best here to take Kail's place. And again, Kail, thank you for your service in all of this. And I hope to do you proud with all this, but very much looking forward to working with everyone here. And thank you for having me. Thank
you. Appreciate that, Marshall, very much. And I had a Corgi once. I had a Corgi mix and a Shepherd mix. So I haven't had a St. Bernard yet, but odds are really good you'll see the Saint running around. It looks like I have a tail when she does, but I really don't. I just want everybody to know that. So in case you were wondering. Awesome. All right. Well, again, thank you and welcome to the board. All right. Next up, business is the election of a BC Building Code Structure Board representative to the Construction Industry Energy Board. At this point in time, I will call upon Tyler Glaze.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Tyler Glaze. I'm a policy analyst for the Building Codes Division. So the way these elections generally work, just to give a quick overview so everyone is on the same page. Generally, it starts out with nominations. So any individual on the board can nominate someone to be the representative to SEEB, and that nomination will then require a second. That individual will then be allowed to say whatever they like as far as their qualifications, their interests, just give a brief description of themselves if they'd like to. And then we will continue nominations until everyone possible who is, people are interested in nominating has been nominated. And then we will take a roll call down each individual as to whether or not the board would like to elect them to be the representative to SEEB. And it would, again, just in case I didn't cover it, these will require a second anytime an individual is nominated. So you think about who you would like to nominate, and Mr. Chair, you can proceed whenever you like with nominations.
All right. Thank you very much, Tyler. Okay, so let me go ahead and open up for nominations for the Construction Industry Energy Board. Anybody?
I've got my hand up there. I didn't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies, Gary. Gary, go ahead, sir.
More of a clarification, I guess. I'm on the Energy Board right now. Are we just looking for a nomination to replace Kail on the SEEB, or are we looking for 2 nominations to the Energy Board?
Tyler, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
Gary, I believe that's just to replace Kail on SEEB, just the 1 nomination.
Okay. Thank you, Tyler.
Perfect. Just to let you know, I'm very much interested in continuing to serve on that board. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, let me go ahead and again open the floor for any nominations to replace Kail as a representative from the board for the Construction Industry Energy Board. Is this where we're kind of voluntold?
Chair Eric Schmidt, I'm interested in the position, but I haven't talked to anyone about the nomination, so I haven't been able to bolster that. So basically, if I am nominated, my interests have to do with the energy code issues that I've worked on before, and pretty deeply involved with those and the projects that I'm involved with. and have some history of that through a number of years. So if there is a nomination for me to do that, I'd be happy to serve in that position.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you very much, Eric.
Chair Schmidt.
Please go ahead.
I'd like to nominate Eric Sandoval to the Construction Industry Energy Board.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion on the floor for Eric Sandoval to be appointed as our representative to the Construction Industry Energy Board. Are there any other, I guess, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it. This is Gary.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Chair Dykeman and Committee Member Heikkinen to elect Eric Sandoval as our Building Code Structure Board representative to the Construction Industry Energy Board. Okay, is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, Eric, again, I personally fully support that. Appreciate you coming forward. I think you would be a great addition to that. Tyler, do you ask Melissa to go ahead and do a roll call at this point in time?
Mr. Chair, assuming there are no other nominations for any other individuals, yes, that would be appropriate.
Okay. Any other nominations for any other member? Okay, hearing none. We have a motion and a second. And Melissa, if I could ask you to call roll, that would be great.
Chair Eric Schmidt.
Aye.
Vice Chair Andy Dykeman.
Aye.
Stephen Forster.
Aye.
Brenda Hartzog.
Aye.
Gary Heikkinen.
Aye.
Marshall McGrady.
Aye.
Randy Samuelson.
Aye.
Eric Sandoval.
Abstain due to conflict of interest.
The motion passes.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Eric, for your willingness to serve in that capacity. It's very much appreciated.
Look forward to doing the service. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Next order of business on the agenda is public comment. I will ask Tyler to weigh in if we have any public comment.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Tyler Glaze, Policy Analyst for the division. Mr. Chair, we do not have anyone who has previously signed up for public comment today, but I would like to ask if anyone is connected here today that would like to make a public comment.
Thank you,
I'm
Tyler.
not hearing anyone.
I see one hand. Terry Whitehill.
Thank you, Chair Schmidt. I just wanted to make sure that when we get into some of the discussions that I'll be able to make comments at that time, but I don't have anything at this time to say. It's more when we get into the code changes. I was on the committee, as was Eric, and attending to help answer any questions or get clarification where I think we need it.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. Tyler, that's okay. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's perfectly appropriate.
Okay, that sounds great. Terry, thank you very much. Are there any other attendees for public comment that want to come forward? I'm not seeing any hands that are raising on the Zoom call. Okay. All right, I guess we will move on to the next agenda item at this time. Next up is reports. Reports and updates. So at this point in time, I will turn it over to Tony Rocco to provide any updates from his perspective. Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, Tony Rocco with the division. Just a short program update for the board today. As you know, our team, we've been focused on the 22 OSSC adoption process review committee is a big part of that. We've been, in that review committee process since October, and it actually just completed here earlier this month, which is fantastic. Just to loop the board in on it, the committee reviewed full draft chapters of the OSSC during that process, which I think was really great. And in those draft chapters, they reviewed model code changes from the IBC, IEBC, and new construction provisions from the IFC, existing and proposed Oregon amendments, public proposals, and even committee member proposals that were kind of made during the process. The committee matrix was the roadmap for that review, but their review really encompassed much more than just those line items of the matrix. And I also wanted to just take this opportunity to thank all of them again for participating on the committee. It's a volunteer army, as we often say, and it's a pretty rigorous and robust code process. And just an outstanding effort all around. So I'm excited to see their recommendations to your board, which really kind of kicks off today and then goes into that next February meeting. So that's really all for my update today. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony, for the report. And before I open it up to others, I just also want to second your comments and thanks and appreciation to the Code Review Committee and all the work that goes into it. I know that's a heck of a lot of work that goes into a short time. And so appreciate everyone's efforts on that. Very, very, very much appreciated. So let me go ahead and open up. Are there any questions to Mr. Rocco?
Mr. Chair, I have a question to Mr. Rocco. Yeah, I know that, thank you. I know that in the past, we've had some discussions about updates to the code and the timing for that and division's ability to manage that based on staffing. And I don't know that we're completely through with this process yet, but just wanted to check in with the division to see how this process has been going in terms of staffing and whether or not that's been supportive enough, or have you needed some more help beyond what you've been able to provide and just done? I'm just kind of looking for a meter, I guess, in terms of how well it's been going, and if you had more resources, would it be better, or you're doing great? So just wanted to check in on that.
Anyways.
Yeah, thanks for the question there, Eric. And through the chair, I think we're doing really great. I think we are on track for our publishing timelines. That's a big part of this. The OSSC is a huge statewide code, and it includes, the IEBC for Chapter 34, as we all know, the new construction provisions of the IFC. So it's even bigger than just the IBC as we look at a national model code. But I think right now, as the board begins its review and we kind of look towards that next step of the publishing process, I'm hoping that we will be able to align with that forecasted anticipated effective date of next fall.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Eric, for that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no follow-up questions. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions of Mr. Rocco for his update? And we're going to hear from him again in just a few minutes, I'm sure. All right, thank you very much. Okay, we will move to, again, thank you, Tony, for that report. We'll go ahead and move to the next agenda item, both under communications and unfinished business. We have none on the agenda that we need to address for either one of those. So at this point, we will move to agenda item number 6 for new business. And we will first work on agenda item 6A. And at this point, I will ask Tyler to please introduce the item.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Tyler Glaze, Policy Analyst for the division. Mr. Chair, first I'd like to address if there's any public testimony. We did not have anybody signed up in advance, but I will ask once again if there is any initial public testimony on this agenda item. Not hearing anyone, Mr. Chair, so I will briefly introduce it. Essentially, this is an action requesting of the board approval regarding proposed code solutions to adopt interim amendments to the 2019 Oregon Structural Specialty Code and new language for the upcoming 2022 OSSC needed to address and clarify construction standards required for childcare facilities located within dwellings. And I believe Alana Cox is connected here today, whom she wishes to provide some additional information. So, Administrator Cox.
Okay, thank you. Hi, good morning, Alana. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Tyler. First, just want to reiterate your comments, Eric and Tony's on the code committee. Really appreciate all the work, huge undertaking and a great service to Oregonians to work through all that stuff. So I appreciate it. On this one specifically, I think the memo does a pretty good job laying things out. Just wanted to provide a little more background. We've been engaging with the Early Learning Division, which licenses these facilities as well as other stakeholders on specific issues related to the sprinkler requirement for childcare. And we issued 2 technical bulletins over the summer, trying to clarify the provision and emphasize the flexibility available to building officials, which is always particularly necessary when you're talking about existing buildings, which most of these are. The code committee recommended this prescriptive compliance option. We adjusted it slightly, which Tony will discuss when he goes over the technical requirements. It provides a prescriptive exception to sprinklers for these facilities. The hope is that providing that prescriptive compliance option for customers and building officials will avoid the need to work through the alternate method process and lead to more consistent outcomes. It should also enhance coordination between building departments and the licensing agency to ensure these facilities meet both the building code requirements and the licensing requirements when providing care for kids. Maybe I'll just pause there and turn it over to Tony to chat more about the technical details. Appreciate board review of this and all the work you're about to do over hopefully just another week or so. And I'll be here for questions as you get into the discussion, but maybe I'll pause and turn it over to Tony if that works for you, Eric.
That sounds great. Thank you very much, Alana. Appreciate that summary. Yes, that sounds great. So Tony, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Alana, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if we look, in the packet there at the actual technical code language, I just kind of wanted to talk through a couple navigational, considerations of how this is laid out. So as we know, historically in Chapter 3 of the OSSC and in the IBC, we have all of our use and classifications, our groups and divisions of those groups. And we have in the Group R space and also in Group I and Group E, we have some unique low occupant threshold care facilities listed in there. And so the committee recommendation was to build in some exceptions to basically the division proposed amendments. The majority of them occur in Chapter 3 there under each independent use. And so when that exception was introduced and recommended by the committee, we basically took that framework and then all we did was really kind of move out of the Chapter 3 location and kind of move back to Chapter 4, Section 420. So what you see now is you see kind of this pointer in Chapter 3. And I don't know if it's helpful if we, share screens or if all board members are able to just, reference the suggested code language there within your packet.
I think, Tony, I'll just interrupt real quick.
Sure.
Tony, whatever you believe is most effective, if you'd like to share your screen and kind of show it. Sometimes a picture's worth 1,000 words, but it's up to you, whichever you prefer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think I'm going to do that right now. I'm just going to share my screen so everybody can see, what I'm looking at here. I just got to find the right one. Okay, I think that's it. And we should see it shared there. Hopefully you can see that code language.
Yes,
perfect.
thank you.
Great. So really what we did here is kind of a combination of that public proposal from Jody Orison on building in kind of an exception to the division proposed amendments. The committee was in favor of that unanimously. We took that general concept and recommendation from the committee. And as Alana said, there was a lot of other discussions and work that was going into the consideration of this matter generally. And so we basically took that framework from Chapter 3. Now we're pointing folks to compliance, more of a technical section or subsection within Chapter 4, and you have an option. So up here in these Chapter 3 amendments, you'll see, provided that Section 420.12 is met, and accessibility is provided in accordance with the applicable provisions of Chapter 11 for the functions served. So we have the flexibility of being permitted to construct these facilities in accordance with the residential code. So that's the key here, right? So we're located within a detached 1 or 2 family dwelling or townhouse. The facility shall be permitted to be constructed in accordance with the residential code, provided that Section 420.12 is met. And so very similar language throughout here. We kept some of the existing model code 5 or fewer subsections within 305, for example. We have some other existing language, existing model language that we left, unamended here and just kind of adapted to what we were doing with this solution. And then we have those new subsections specifically addressing registered and certified family child care facilities in Oregon as defined in ORS 329A. So then when we get through these pointers, we get to that 420.12 section. Right up front in the charging language, we have childcare facilities located within dwellings permitted by Chapter 3 to be constructed in accordance with the residential code shall comply with either 420.12.1 or 420.12.2. So that's where we see that option come in for compliance. So the first item, that's the item that Administrator Cox just spoke about, gave some good background on. That's where they do provide automatic sprinkler protection in that dwelling setting. And again, the reference here, 903.313, is to 13B in Chapter 9 of the OSSC. So that's option 1. Option 2 for these facilities is where they do not install that automatic sprinkler system throughout the fire area of the dwelling where the child care facility is located. All of the following shall be met. And so these 3 items are the secondary option of compliance for them. And so this is more of just a printing exercise and kind of organizing it, but instead of listing these within numerous areas inside Chapter 3, we saw it as being a little bit more linear to have a standalone section kind of capturing the nuts and bolts of the technical portions of the compliance paths in Chapter 4 there. So I hope that helps. Mr. Chairman, as always, any other questions for me, I'm happy to do my best to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the report on this, Tony, and also Alana again for that summary introductory, so appreciate that. Let me, so in terms of process, I see that Terry Whitehill's hand is up. So Tyler, from a process standpoint, that's okay as a committee member for him to weigh in if you'd like to offer up any supporting comments, or is this really amongst the board at this point in time?
Mr. Chair, that is entirely up to your discretion as to when you'd like to take comments on the issue.
Okay. No, I would. I mean, I think that, again, I know Terry was a member of the code review committee. So Terry Whitehill, if you'd like to go ahead and give us your comments, that would be great.
Thank you, Chairman Schmidt. Hey, the question that I have, Tony, is that in those changes, it talks about 5 or fewer, but then it talks about the licensing. Does the licensing one get you above the 5 number?
Thanks for that question, Terry. Through the chair, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Terry, great question, and it does. And so really the reference here is back to that statute. So back to ORS 329A and the registered family child care homes, which allow, I believe, up to 10 occupants, and then the certified family child care homes, which would allow up to, I believe, 16. So yes, so that we're intending to very specifically capture those statutorily defined, not our statutes, but statutorily defined care facilities there. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, it does. That's what I wanted to hear. I think that a lot of people may not catch that, but hopefully you guys can put something out to help clarify that to other jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Tony. I see a question in the chat from Rose Herrera. Public comment question: is there any consideration to expand the exception being considered for child care facilities to also allow exception for residential care homes, such as foster care or group homes with 5 or less capacity? Tony, do you have any initial comments on that? Is this specifically around child care facilities at this point in time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Alana, I think would also be able to chime in here. But so a couple of things. So yeah, so this is specific to daycare, child care facilities, less than 24-hour care within a dwelling here. So
Okay.
I don't know if Alana would like to add to that.
Yeah, that's correct through the chair, if it's all right. So we're just talking about childcare here. The changes in April also included adult foster care, and we've been working through that with folks. And so right now there are no plans to change on the adult foster side. I think group homes have long required sprinklers. Tony can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but this conversation is specific to childcare.
Okay. Thank you, Alana. And thank you, Rose, for that question. Okay, at this point in time, what I will do is open it up to the board of any additional questions that you have for either Mr. Rocco or Ms. Cox. Let's go ahead and open up for any questions. Please, is it just a reference for this agenda item? This ultimately will need to have a motion. And then also we will call votes in terms of ultimate approval. So there's a few different ways on motion language about how we can work on this. But before we get to that place, let's go ahead and open up for any questions board members have of Mr. Rocco.
Chair Eric Schmidt, I do have a comment, but no question.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Eric.
So specifically related to the way that this is structured from Chapter 3 through to Chapter 4, I really like this style of orchestrating this code because it tends to accentuate, create a higher sense of safety, health by moving it from 3 as a general sense in occupancy to a more specific, specialized occupancy in 420. So I'm really supportive of the way that the division and the proposal and the folks that were in the committee moved this into 420. I think it becomes clearer and stronger as a way to help balance out the sprinkler and alternate method. That's not an alternate, but actually code language. So I'm just really supportive of the 420 idea. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric, for those comments. I would agree. As I reviewed the item myself, I did like just how clear it was. It really and how it folded in. So I think that the work was well done. Steve Forrester, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 questions on a best for Tony, or I'll let you, the chair, and Tony figure out who'd be best to answer. But 2 clarifying questions. The first on the reference to accessibility requirements. When I just read this, I'm not sure. To me, it's not super clear whether accessibility has to be provided throughout the entire structure or only in the areas of childcare. And then the second question, there's a reference that the sprinkler system needs to be provided throughout the fire area. Our board primarily dealing with the structural code fire areas is clear. I'm not as sure, since we're saying you build under the residential code. I have far less expertise in the residential code. Just wanted to make sure, will the term fire area cause any confusion in application of the residential code? I'm not sure if that's a defined term. So those are the 2 questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for those questions. And definitely I'll ask Tony to weigh in on here. I had a similar question in terms of the fire area myself. I think a similar concern about how, from a residential side, folks might interpret what fire area means. Is it a portion of the dwelling, or is it the entire dwelling? So, Tony, can you please go ahead and speak to those 2 questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Forrester, for the questions. So I'll start out with the first one. When we look at accessibility, there's going to be quite a few variables here, whether it's a newly constructed facility, a change of occupancy to a new facility in an existing building, or an existing building. So really what we have here is that it's just intending to point to Chapter 11. up front in Chapter 11, I want to say it's section like 1103. We have some very clear guidance for multiple iterations now in the OSSC where daycare facilities or childcare is provided within a dwelling, that only the area of the business or the care area is required to be accessible, which also aligns with kind of long-standing live-work unit. You know, what we do for any type of business within a home that meets that live-work threshold. You're only providing accessibility for the business portion of that live-work unit. So I hope that addresses question number one. Question number two, great question. And I think the reason why we used fire area is that this language, it appears in the OSSC. It is, again, we're only pointing these facilities to the OSSC for construction standards, not for everything else. So it's only for how you can construct the building or the facility. And so in this case, we absolutely, at the pleasure of the board, look at some different language there in place of fire area, but the intention was to provide potentially flexibility in unique scenarios. So let's say it's not very common in these dwellings, of course, to have separate fire areas per a 707-310 separation, you know, fire barrier, horizontal assemblies. But let's say they wanted to do that. And so they wanted to have a very, you know, specific area of care. And then they wanted to separate it by those fire resistance rated separations in accordance with Chapter 7 of the OSSC. That would just provide more of a path for them to get there. And then they could, in that case, just provide the sprinkler system in that fire area. That's probably very unlikely to even occur. But again, just wanted to kind of leave that door open instead of saying that just outright per the 13D standard, the entire dwelling where the business is located would be sprinklered. Hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Steve, does that help answer the questions that you might have?
Yeah, I think so. And I guess, and I'm comfortable with the language, particularly hearing Tony explain it. I think that makes a lot of sense. We do certainly see a lot of, there's a lot of variation in the types of facilities and portions of facilities or homes that are used for childcare. We certainly have seen a lot of, you know, sort of additions that are built sort of separate where a barrier could be applied. And so, yeah, I think that is a reasonable approach, certainly open to any other comments or suggestions on it. I guess the one piece I would ask maybe is that it might be helpful if I know BCD has I believe it's a white paper or something similar related to childcare facilities. It may not hurt to memorialize that sort of understanding, like in that white paper, for example. I think it was just recently updated not too long ago. That'd be my only suggestion, but I'm comfortable with the answers on both the accessibility and on the fire barrier or fire area question.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And I was thinking along the same lines as you in terms of the code language, assuming the board concurs that the code language, proposed code language is acceptable and approved. Then to your point about the average provider that's running a business, do they understand how to navigate a technical code like this? So could we enhance the communication, whether it's a white paper, a single, whatever collateral piece that kind of speaks to what this looks like, that, the reality is that means your entire dwelling is going to have a sprinkler system unless you do this and this and this. So maybe Ms. Cox, does that sound something that sounds like, okay, thank you very much. So see affirmative, that's something that, assuming this is approved as is, that the board could, the division could move forward and enhance the communications or just work on the communications and outreach. So that sounds good.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, if I may, we had
Please.
exactly the same thought that we're going to definitely need to communicate really well about this. So if the board concurs with this change, we have a very brief technical bulletin we would kind of blast out right away. So when we do the temporary rules, so that everyone's just aware of the exception immediately. Okay. And then we'll work on something longer that includes more of these details. I think these are great items to cover. So we were kind of thinking a short, fast one and then a longer one as we take a little time to kind of work through it.
Okay, thank you very much, Alana. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, just one other comment or thought or suggestion, I guess, for that clarification. It may be helpful to also clarify this garage area separation. So I believe a typical garage separation right in the residential code wouldn't meet fire barrier separation in the structural code. So it may be beneficial. I believe the intent of this is a 13D system, right, which would not be in the garage. But again, for the average user who may not be proficient with jumping between all the codes and standards, I think that'd be an important point to hit in that white paper as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate those suggestions. Board members, any additional questions or discussion items about this? As you've reviewed it, you've heard the reports, the work that's gone into this. Is there any other questions that you have? And if not, you have with you a help sheet that was sent out that outlines 3 potential motions, one of which is to approve, one of which is to amend and approve, and then lastly would be a motion to disapprove the proposed language.
Credit card's in there.
Somebody's mic's on. The
yes, because the other was a separate company, right?
I'm sure it is. Okay, so board members, any other discussion, or is anybody prepared to make a motion? Go ahead.
Chair.
Yes,
Chairman Eric Schmidt. I like to do a motion to approve the committee recommendation and forward to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption, with the finding that the added cost, if any, is necessary to the health and safety of occupants or the public, or necessary to conserve scarce resources.
Thank you, Eric. Tyler, point of clarification for you in terms of the motion. I think Eric may have inadvertently left out just one part of that motion. Do you need to see that full motion language?
No, Mr. Schmidt, I believe that suffices.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor from Eric Sandoval to approve the proposed language, and I don't think we require a second, or is that procedurally? Okay, we do not require a second. Okay, with that, we will go ahead and ask Melissa to please do a roll call.
Stephen Forster.
Aye.
Brenda Hartzog.
Aye.
Gary Hakinen.
Aye.
Marshall McGrady.
Aye.
Randy Samuelson.
Aye.
Eric Sandoval.
Aye.
Vice Chair Andy Dykeman.
Aye.
Chair Eric Schmidt.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the work on that. Thank you, everybody that contributed to this important code change. Glad we were able to get through this in an efficient manner. So that concludes that agenda item, which was great. We're ahead of schedule. That's good news. I think at this point in time, I think the next order of business is item 6B, which is again now board review and discussion chapters 3 through 30 of the 2022 Oregon Structural Specialty Code. And I guess if I might just take a moment and let me just get kind of an environmental scan for the board members themselves. We have time set aside on February 2nd for us to dive into this. We can certainly start some of that discussion today if you would like. Part of what I'm also trying to think through and would welcome any kind of suggestions on this is how we want to, as efficiently as possible, go through all of these and make our approval of the code changes themselves. Knowing that, again, the heavy lifting on this was done with the code change committee. A lot of time was spent with them. I know we all nominated them previously. We have faith in their work. I know they've done a lot of this work, but that said, there may be some of these code items that either we individually have questions on, or the public also may want to weigh in as well. Today's an opportunity. We have not had any public comment as it relates to the code changes. other than Mr. Whitehill, who again has served on the code change committee and serves as a resource for us to help address any clarifying questions we might have that the code review committee went through. I think I also, again, so I'm just kind of speaking openly right now and about how we most effectively want to do this work. Do we want to go ahead and start diving in today for the remainder of about a half hour or 45 minutes on this item? Or is it the desire of the board to go ahead and just use that February 2nd for dedicated time to see if we can get through this on February 2nd, and if need be, a little bit on February 9th? Eric Sandoval, please go ahead.
Yeah, Chairman Eric Schmidt, I see the work that was done by the committee and also as a part of that committee in 3 parts. And again, these are just my organizational methods, not necessarily that of any committee or the Building Codes Division. The 3 pieces that I see are existing Oregon amendments, which tends to be relatively straightforward and simple. The second one has to do with many ideas that are brought forward that were not necessarily talked about a lot and seem to be going pretty cursory, which is kind of like an IBC base, looks good, kind of move forward. And then there's items that had a lot of discussion to them, and many of those, if not all, are in red on the matrix. So to me, the ones that may want to have some visibility in the board meeting may be the ones with the red markings. We may want to go deeper than that, but my thought was that we might want to look at this in those 3 parts, one of being existing Oregon amendments, the second one being the IBC baselines or IEBC baselines that looked like there were no real discussion points. And then the third group of being the ones with the red. So that would be my thought to you and to the board, that might be an option for organizational methods of review.
Okay, appreciate that, Eric. Thank you. I see a few different hands up as well, or a couple other ones. So Gary, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good suggestions, Eric. First of all, I'm certainly available and willing and able to work at this until we have to close at 11 o'clock just to get going on it. That's number one, as long as everybody else is available. Number 2, I think it makes sense to go through section by section. Doesn't mean to say that we need to discuss anything, but for example, that first section 3, and if there's anything requiring discussion or anybody having questions, to do it. If not, step on to the next session and highlight those again that might have financial or economic impacts and the red comments, as Eric was stating. So I think stepping through the matrix is a good way to go without discussing each and every one. Discuss by exception if somebody's got a question. So
thank you, Gary. I think you're thinking along the lines that I am thinking as well, as can we group some of these if there's no concerns from the board and basically approve them, and then spend a little bit more quality time on a couple that we have more discussions or there's been public comment on. And I like the suggestion of potentially going through chapter by chapter, I think is what you're suggesting. And that would be easy to manage. But before we make any finals on that, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, just a clarifying question, since we don't do this too often. Do we need to approve all of the existing amendments to carry those forward? Is that an action item, or are we only reviewing and approving basically the public proposals, if you will, that are in there? Can you clarify that?
Yeah, let me go ahead and ask staff to weigh in on that, please.
I'll jump in here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And thanks for that question, Mr. Forrester. So generally speaking, the matrix is, the way we've built it is it captures all of those existing Oregon amendments that are being recommended to move forward. And then those that are being recommended to be rescinded or have been maybe replaced by the new model code as a base. In the past, building code structure board members have handled it differently. We've seen sweeping motions on chapters or on a range of chapters, and Tyler can help out a little bit more on that on the options on the motions. But I think it's at the pleasure of the board. I mean, ultimately, we'll be covering all of this, all of the committee recommendations for essentially the entire OSSC. So every chapter, every provision, including those appendices. So I don't know if that helps, but thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. And I think one of my goals, and maybe it's the board's as well, unless there's some other reason that we have to. I just remember last time, Tony, you were reading forever, right? You were going through all of these. And so if there's a way for us to save you that time and energy, then that would be a great thing as well. Okay. Any other suggestions? Can I get maybe maybe a show of hands on the screen? Like, do you want to go ahead and start today on something? Or is that a hands up? Yes, you want to go ahead and do it. So we had a census. All right. Okay. We're here for a little bit longer today, and we will go ahead and get this item started. Let me, and Tyler and or Tony, please let me know again if this is not okay in terms of how we're going to move forward with this. So I'm going to ask Tyler to introduce the item, and certainly again Tony then to help supplement from providing technical details. In terms of the board deliberation on the matrix that we have, is to Gary's suggestion and Eric's suggestion, kind of combining those. Is it acceptable to the board to be able to kind of, in essence, go chapter by chapter, ultimately? And if there are, and I can do an ask, if there's any item there that you really want to take out and work on, whether it's ones in red or ones in blue. But if not, to get kind of in essence, and I don't know if it's officially like a motion or at least a consensus agreement that the rest of them are okay. And we're just going to focus on those 1, 2, or maybe none. Does that sound okay? And we'll kind of do it chapter by chapter. Okay, see some thumbs ups on those. All right. Okay. I think that's an official, I'm not sure how you capture that in the meeting minutes, but it's a thumbs up. All right. That sounds great. Okay. Appreciate that. Appreciate the discussion. And let's go ahead and dive in. So Tyler, please let me go ahead and have you introduce.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Tyler Glaze from the division. Just as a quick bit of background, at the board's June 30th, 2021 meeting, the Building Code Structures Board established a code review committee and recommended the 2021 International Building Code, the IBC, as the base model code for Oregon. The OSSC review committee completed an analysis of the 2021 IBC changes, 2021 International Existing Building Code changes, 2021 International Fire Code, new construction provisions, existing Oregon Code amendments, new proposed amendments, public amendment proposals, and alternate method rulings. The committee met 6 times beginning October 14th, 2021, and finalizing their recommendations to the board, which are here before you today, on January 4th, 2022. So if you look in your agendas, the matrix including with the board packet includes a full list of recommendations from that committee, along with cost impacts noted by the committee. The board packet includes a document with committee recommendations, along with supporting documentation. All committee meeting recordings are available at that website listed on the board memo. And adopting the 2022 OSSC will require the Building Codes Division to engage in rulemaking. The division is appointing the Building Code Structure Board as a Rules Advisory Committee under ORS 183333. The division has taken steps to identify the rules it believes will be affected by the adoption of the new code, and it's prepared possible changes to the rule language. And the division is seeking the board's input on those draft rules and any potential fiscal impacts. So if there are fiscal impacts, as Tony is going through these various chapters and the various changes in the matrix, if the board would like to point those out, we would greatly appreciate that. And I believe Tony Rocco has some detailed technical information to go over.
Okay, thank you very much, Tyler. Tony, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. Again, for the record, Tony Rocco with the division. So we're looking at our matrix as Tyler noted for us, and a couple of things up above that'll be important just navigationally as we work through this together. You see the two different colors of ORA, and that is to capture an existing organ amendment and then also a new organ amendment, whether that was something that the division put forward to the review committee to consider, or maybe a committee member had a proposal kind of as the process was going on, it becomes captured as a new organ amendment. We also have public proposals called out, and then we have a few items which I believe Mr. Sandoval noted that are captured in red. We also have some fiscals to discuss, and those are captured in the right-hand column under outcome, and those will be captured in green. And so all this information, the draft chapters, we could pull up any of those at the pleasure of the board as we kind of walk through. So for today's agenda, we have noticed chapters 3 through 30, except for a couple of items that have been reserved for your meeting next week. So at the pleasure of the board, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just start kind of going through chapter 3, if that works.
Yes, any additional questions from the board for either Mr. Rocco or Mr. Blades before we get started? Okay, hearing none. Tony, please go ahead.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at chapter 3, building planning, we have some existing organ amendments up front, long-standing. I believe they were from Oregon Department of Corrections regarding lockup facilities. We have a reference to their statute. That's the first item there, section 304.5. The next item regarding care facilities, the board addressed this primarily in the last agenda item 6A. But there are just a couple of other pieces there for the board to be aware of, and that's really providing the flexibility again for all of those care facilities for 5 or fewer to be able to have that path back to the residential code for construction standards when they're providing care for 5 or fewer. So model code alignment, you do provide a domestic residential sprinkler system in those cases, and you also provide accessibility as applicable for the design. That is included there. There is an increase. I believe the increase for new construction was given by a committee member at approximately $1.50 a square foot for sprinkler systems for those indwelling care facilities that we didn't already capture through the action in 6A. As we move through to 306.2, the F1 classification, again, just some really good model code stuff in this 21 IBC, a lot of great changes. And this one has to do with energy storage systems. We're going to get into that a little bit further as we move on, particularly into chapter 4. We'll cover some of that. And just some examples were added to that list, the including but not limited to list under group F1 there in chapter 3. Same with F2. We have an existing organ amendment there that aligns with the winery statute and that path that we're aware of with the longstanding organ approach for wineries. So you see that there, 306.3, 307.11 model code change, really great change. Use is not classified as group H. This aligns with our existing interp regarding small distillation operations and basically just clarifies it. So really good model code cleanup. You see that there. We have some existing organ amendments there. The next few are all existing organ amendments, and they have to do with everything from storage of fireworks to basically alignment with statute, and then also licensure standards. So if you recall, prior to the 14 OSSC being promulgated, we removed Appendix SR. That was a very big effort here at the division and with our stakeholders. And when Appendix SR went away, that's where we got the R4 conditions 1 and 2, the I1s conditions 1 and 2, and all of that work that we did with DHS and OHA back then, and the Office of the State Fire Marshal. So you see those there. Those are existing amendments moving forward. To retain, we have accessory storage spaces, just an organ amendment that occurred during the 19 OSSC, just to allow some flexibility in how that accessory storage space is classified. And then as we move kind of through the last couple there in chapter 3, we have, again, clarification on the list of what meets the group S1 and S2 designations. And we also have low hazard storage group S2 clarification. And this one has to do with storage of beverages, specifically alcohol beverages. It's been clarified there in the S1 and the S2. And then we, again, have an longstanding Oregon amendment there that aligns with the Oregon-specific winery approach, which aligns with statute. And then the S3 designation specific to mausoleums and columbariums, which is all a unique Oregon amendment. And that takes us through Chapter 3. At the pleasure of the board, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop there, turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. Appreciate your summary. And let me just real quick, since as we start to set this model as we go through the rest of the chapters, board members, does this meet your need in terms of the level of kind of a summary that Mr. Rocco is providing? And then I guess at the end of this chapter, then I just want to ask, is there anything that the committee members, or I'm sorry, board members would want to pull aside and discuss, or are we okay to keep proceeding? So Steve, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just one question for Tony, back on the child care, or I guess I should ask, so is it after, I like this format, going through the chapter, covering it all at once, and then I'm presuming, or want to clarify, is it okay then for us to ask any questions at the end of that summary? Is that the intent?
I think that would be great. Yeah, let's kind of go chapter by chapter and see if we can basically put a bow on that chapter, not an official motion. We'll just put a bow on it and keep moving on. But yeah, let's do chapter by chapter. So Steve, your questions, it's timely.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. Mr. Rocco, you mentioned on the child care, I just wanted to confirm you covered that the additional changes that are necessary for the construction provisions. You did use I believe you used the term, 5 or less. And I just wanted to confirm, because again, some licensed child cares are more than 5.
There is that.
Is that okay? Right? And Eric, I think you have, I think there's background noise coming from Eric, your
that's great.
Mute.
With the Christine Minkowski.
Shared workspace of a Zoom environment. No, not a problem, Eric. Thank you. So Steve, thank you for your question. Tony, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, yes. Thank you, Mr. Forrester. So, and maybe it confused things. So I was just trying to clarify that we dealt with the child care uses very specifically in agenda item 6A prior to this agenda item. And so there is still some portions of that chapter 3 that just addressed care facilities for 5 or fewer, separately from the child care facilities. So for those of you that are familiar with kind of the scope of the model code under the IRC allows essentially any type of care facility for 5 or fewer individuals, whether it be custodial care, medical care, child care, whatever type of care it is. And so there are still some edits there that occur in chapter 3 for those other care facilities that we didn't already address in those amendments regarding child care facilities, which we captured those uses for up to 10 children receiving care and up to 16 respectively, as defined by the licensing authorities statutes. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Steve, for the question. Okay, so I guess we'll do the thumbs up thing. Board, you comfortable with us moving on to chapter 4? All right. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and keep moving. I guess let me just ask a suggestion / question. Tony, I'm looking at chapter 4 and there's a lot to it, right? So unless, again, there is a need from a process standpoint, I'm personally okay if you just kind of from your perspective hit the highlights of which ones you want to really point out versus having to go through each one of them. Does that work for the board? Okay, that sounds good. So Tony, I would defer to you, your best judgment. You were involved with the code committees, those kinds of things. Let us know which ones that really just need a little bit of, the fiscal part or the it's red or that kind of stuff, of where you think you're like, it would be important for the board to hear.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman and board. So as we kind of roll through here, what we see up front is we see some model code changes, right? So some of them resulted in savings. You'll see that in the outcome column. All of those, as we move through, I'm looking at 40761. Still, we're looking at model code changes. And that's just part of us going from that 18 iteration to that 21 iteration vetted national model code. Then we get into, again, some existing Oregon amendments that are just being retained. So nothing new there. Those are just current law that will continue to be law in the future under this next iteration. So some good things there under our special amusement areas. This is a good one to point out. 411.5, the National Model Code has addressed puzzle rooms uniquely, and so I know that's something that has been discussed quite a bit, and in many jurisdictions on how to address those uses. And so you see that
escape rooms,
yeah,
like those kinds of things. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yep. Exactly. So now we'll have a citable code path for that. So the Oregon Structural Specialty Code is getting better for the state here as we move forward. We do have existing fire suppression for aircraft hangars. Your board will recall quite a bit of effort and discussion went into that existing Oregon amendment. So that existing amendment moving forward. Emergency control station. This was one where board member Eric Sandoval had kind of a great look forward to the 24 IBC kind of on the fly. And this is one of those examples of a committee member proposing something kind of during the process based on their experience with maybe ongoing national model processes. And you'll see that there. It's item 415.11.10, and it also impacts section 1017.2.3 regarding H5 facilities. So a really collaborative effort on the committee, a lot of discussion and dialogue. Kenton Akins, he really kind of stepped up and supported Eric on trying to come up with a code solution for this. So that's a good one, and that's something where it will be unique in our Oregon code under the 21 IBC base. A couple of things here. One to point out, 423 for storm shelters. So there are many areas of the National Model Code where they don't apply in Oregon. And so, right, because it's a national model code, and these are things that I think it's helpful to constantly remind our stakeholders of, is that it's a national model code, not an Oregon specific model code. And so we look at some of those things like storm shelters where we don't have the design thresholds necessary to trigger the requirement of these storm shelters. And so we're essentially, even though there's a bunch of new provisions for them, they just don't apply in Oregon. So same with hurricane prone regions is another great example. And so we do our best during publishing to remove those as they are not applicable in our state. Some additional new model code changes here, some modifications on play structures. We have some modifications regarding combustible dust in 426. And as we look at the last few there, I'm on page 3 of 19 of your board matrix, right up at the top. The last few of these, Eric from our team did a fantastic job on this integration effort with working with Laura from our team. Again, Laura did a fantastic job getting these new construction provisions of the IFC kind of integrated in with our OSSC and a lot of effort on the committee side. But that's really what you're seeing there. Those last couple, or those three right there: combustible dust, the ESS, which also included a public proposal, which was approved. And then the storage of distilled spirits and wines, it had a piece on both sides, on the IFC side and on the IBC side. So a great collaborative effort there. And then we have longstanding Oregon amendment regarding piers and wharves. And then again, those mausoleums and columbariums. So as you see by these section numbers, chapter 4 again is quite a hefty chapter in our OSSC moving forward. So I'll turn it back over to you there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that summary. Any questions from the board as it relates to chapter 4? Okay, Steve, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, the 415. So Tony, you just mentioned on, I believe it was a proposal for 415. that would create a unique condition in Oregon that doesn't exist anywhere else. And so it just seems like if that's the case, that is a new proposal modifying model code, that's something that we may want to hear separately. I'd be interested in that. Certainly is one of our sort of charging statutes, is to adopt model code as, essentially as close as practical to model code. So unless there's specific state law or some other condition that really requires us to do an amendment, I think that should be vetted a little bit.
Okay.
And then 426 through 456, I just wanted to clarify the combustible dust, the ESS, and storage of distilled spirits. Mr. Rocco, did you say that those are changed? Because I don't see, only one of them has a public proposal. Were those items that just needed some kind of revision to align better with IFC? Or in fact, are these sort of new concepts or new proposals that modify the code? Can you clarify that on those?
Yeah, absolutely. Through the chair, great questions there, Mr. Forrester. So the first one, if I can talk to that, if we back up to 415, and maybe I didn't capture it directly, but essentially it is taking the 2024 IBC as the basis, the framework for what the public proposal, the committee member proposal ended up being. And I'm sure Mr. Sandoval would be happy to speak to that, and we can pull up the language on the screen. So it was just we were kind of a look forward on this very specific model code item. And then when we look at the 426 and 430, they were both just new IFC modifications. So like significant changes in the model code IFC. And then the public proposal, it was already being vetted with industry. And I believe it was either proposed or will be included in Chapter 12 of the IFC in the 2024 iteration. So again, kind of one of those things, look forward and cherry pick it into our code because it does provide some safety there and vehicle damage protections.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
So Steve, to just get further on your question as it relates to 415, 1110, Eric Sandoval, is there anything that you would like to, if we want to go ahead and talk about that one.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the background noise. I'll try to be a little louder so I can speak over my colleague here. So 415.11 has a direct connection to the egress portion in 1017. So they kind of go together. What's happening is that in the 2024 IBC, the 1017.3 went through committee, and the IBC committee said, you need to really get some additional vetting on this because we are a committee, we don't understand what you're doing. So can you get a third-party review on it? So there was a third-party review of that particular method of extending the travel distance from 200 feet to 300 feet. Conceptually, what's happening is that the volumetrics of the H5, as these fabs are getting bigger and bigger, the smoke is getting higher and it has more potential for us to get out of the buildings. The caveat to that is that the ventilation system needs to keep running. And this is counterintuitive to many of the code provisions that are out there. And the way that the language is set up is that as soon as you sense smoke, you shut down the exhaust systems. Where in fact, if you did that in this particular facility, you would actually make it worse. You'd make the inability for us to migrate, and you can see within seconds. So there's a need to keep the ventilation system going. And the way that you do that separately from the rest of the code is through the H5 method of organizing systems. And so this emergency control station is a particular area within H5s that allow that discernment, EHS discernment of how to operate systems. So those two need to go together. And so 1017 and the 415 provision for emergency control systems are tied together. And that's the background on that particular provision. So it's 2024 IBC basis with a trigger through 415 control station.
And so it's the 2024 language. Was that officially adopted? You said it was not adopted in 2024.
So the way it went was the committee said no. Then there was a public comment that validated that through third-party review. Then it went to General Assembly. General Assembly said yes with the new information, and then was adopted throughout all the the jurisdictional review at the end of November. So ultimately, the 2024 provisions are in. And so I would tell you that the 2024 proposal through public comment was approved through General Assembly.
Thank you, Eric. Steve, does that answer your questions okay on 415?
Yes, I guess. I'm still a little, I read the proposal too, and it was just hard to see, like it didn't have track change. It was really hard for me to follow exactly what we were approving. And I didn't really see any discussion of the justification. So I was a little bit nervous about that, right? Deviating from model code, currently, right, adopted model code in 21 without sort of a clear, what is it that is the change, and sort of that justification.
We can, I guess what we could do again is we could table that one just to give you a few more moments to look through that, and then we can certainly circle back on February 2nd and see if there's any additional discussion or clarity, if that's helpful. And then, assuming the board is comfortable, we can ask and see if the rest of chapter 4 is good to go at this point in time. Does that sound okay, Steve?
Yeah, I'd be perfectly comfortable with that. I think everything else in 4 looks great. And then we can just follow up on that item on the 2nd. That'd be perfect. Okay.
Is that acceptable to the board, or is there any additional items on chapter 4, or are we good to go on chapter 4 and we'll just table 415, 1110 and circle back on that one on February 2nd? Okay. All right. That sounds great. Okay, let's see if we can maybe get through one more here on chapter 5. What do you, and I don't see much red there, so we'll see. Let's go ahead and go for it and see if we can get through chapter 5 today. And if not, we'll figure out where we're at and assess in about 10 more minutes. So Mr. Rocco, please go ahead.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great plan. So we're going through chapter 5 now, taking a look. And what we see first is we see, again, just some address identification, existing organ amendments regarding statutory authority in kind of 45020. That's right up front. And then the next few, we see some very specific IBC changes, clarifications. And the great thing is that anytime you see, so let's look at table 5043, you see table 5043, 5044, you see some additional increases there, and those were already codified. So while they look like a new provision in the IBC, they are new in the National Model Code. But here in Oregon, through this board, the OSSC already included the Tallwood Buildings Appendix. So anytime we see that 4A, 4B, 4C type of construction, we know that that's really just a move rather than something that's new. So some good stuff there. That appendix, as part of the printing process, will go away, of course, as it's now been integrated into the body of the OSSC moving forward. There is, we have an existing amendment there, 508.1. General mixed use and occupancy, and that is specific to the winery. So you'll all recall that. I imagine I can picture it in my head where it appears in the right-hand column there with the double track lines. And so again, longstanding organ amendment specific to wineries. Just a couple of updates there by our technical staff for clarification and those updates were vetted with the committee. A couple of things here. Just some formatting, some very minor things in the model code level. If you look at 508441, again, that's another one just moved from Appendix P. We tried our best to identify that for you in the matrix, but it is a new model code item, just moved from our existing Tallwood building provisions here in Oregon. Live work units, that's a pretty big one. So longstanding, it's been located in the end of Chapter 4. Section 419 for a long time, and now it's moved. So now they move it up to kind of the mixed use provisions, which makes more sense really because of the way that they address those live work units with the group R2 classification for the entire live work, and then the no separations are required. However, you have to provide sprinkler protection throughout the entire unit, and then accessibility in those business areas. So really good, just model code fix there, approved. We also added an amendment just clarifying the path that already exists in the OSSC. This is more of just a technical adjustment, but that you see 508-571, and just clarifying that you can do a 13D system when these live work units are located within a dwelling that's governed by the OSSC. And again, that's historically consistent with our longstanding approach for that. You have some clarifications on the IBC regarding storage battery systems as incidental uses. And so now basically correlating exactly back to the ESS that we have now in Chapter 4. Now you're going to have an incidental use separation specific there in the Table 5091. And then 510.2, this one is fantastic. I mean, this model code change has come up on my radar more times than I can count, and it has to do with stairway construction in pedestal buildings and the design, and switching between that 1A construction and that commonly Type 5 construction, and what do you do with those interior exit stairways. So really good model code change. It's been kind of an interp from ICC for some time here. Also Woodworks and American Wood Council had an interp on it as well. So again, another improvement for our OSSC for the state of Oregon. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop there, turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And let me just open it up. Board members, is there any questions that you have about any of the ones in Chapter 5? Okay, not seeing any. And so can I get a thumbs up for Chapter 5 in terms of where we're at? Okay, all right. Thank you for that. I think at this point in time, we're going to pause after Chapter 5 and start to wrap up this meeting. I do want to say, one, I appreciate the board's openness for how we're starting to navigate these code changes and review them in our role as the board. I know we're moving quickly, and so for those certainly in the audience and for maybe watching this, I think our ability to do this relies heavily on the faith and trust we have in the Code Change Committee itself, and the work in collaboration with BCD staff in looking at the codes and bringing forward to our board this summary level matrix. So it helps us not have to have the need to get into each code change. That's not necessarily our role. That's why we have the Code Change Committee. So again, I appreciate all of everybody's efforts on this. And so that makes our job even that much easier and more efficient. So I think the system that we're working through today will work effectively, and we can then start to get ready for February 2nd. So I think what I heard today is we are through Chapter 5. The only code change is under 415.1110 that we will bring back and include into our discussion on February 2nd, and then see how much more progress we can make on February 2nd on the remaining chapters. So with that, again, board, thank you very much. Is there any, as it relates to the process that we're going through, any other suggestions as we continue to navigate through the rest of these chapters? Okay, hearing none. Okay, I think, and let's see, before we conclude, we have one other agenda item around announcements. Is there any announcements either from BCD staff or the board members that they would like to bring forward at this time? Okay, hearing none. Since there's no further business today, we'll go ahead and announce that the meeting is now adjourned. The time is 10:54 a.m. Thank you again for being here. We'll see you on February 2nd. All right, thanks everybody.